Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Common Fiction. If you have seen my last TikTok, I said I was going to get a mic. Well, here it is, a mic, which will make things way more easier for future episodes because I don't have to type everything. Now, sorry if you hear any background noise. Yeah, I live in a shitty apartment, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of fuckheads. And I still live with my family, and I am in the living room. Please help. But anyway, today, I wanted to talk about, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, specifically, 2012 Ninja Turtles. Now, I already, recorded for this, but at the time, my family was being loud, so I still have that recording, but I'm just going to scrap it. Didn't get too far into what I was trying to say, but I watched more of the season. I'm like on or series, I'm on like season 4. Yeah, I'm binge watching it with my little brother. But anyway, but it wasn't as organized, where around this time, it will be. So without further ado, let's start on season 1. But before we do any of that, so I actually lied. Before we do any of that, I do want to bring up one thing, and that's, I guess people aren't as fond of 2012 Ninja Turtles. I don't know if that's because people don't like certain things, like with them going to space, or a lot of the wacky stuff about it, or if it's just like a matter of, oh well, I only like classic, fuck 2012. Me personally though, I think it does a lot to pay homage to a lot of the older storylines, because a lot of the older, like the storylines within the show, I didn't know was already in the comic books. I thought it was new. And there's also a lot of new things that they do that I think are really good and cool and that can actually fit with it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, like I said, let's start with season 1. Now, in season 1, episode 1, it does a great job of basically showing you how it is for the Ninja Turtles within the sewers, or how it was until later in the episode, as well as like how it is for them as teenagers, because I feel like a lot of people forget, oh well, they're teenagers, and honestly a lot of the times they act like grown men. So I like how the whole series does really good with the whole teenager thing. But this particular episode was one of my favorites, between showing that that they've been eating algae this whole time, and that it's like this little, if I remember correctly, it's like a sort of like anniversary celebration thing, or a birthday of some sort. I'll put in editing to correct myself if I'm wrong. And all that. And not just that, but you see the love that they have for Splinter and for each other as a family, which you see a lot more of later on, but I digress. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, so, but, in the episode, Splinter lets them up on the surface for the first time, or at least officially for the first time, because it is referenced a lot throughout the show that they know what goes on the surface, or they at least have had to gone up there for whatever reason, or at least have peeked up there. So there is that, at least. But I guess this is like officially as ninjas, but they get up there, they're having fun, it's real great. Now here's two things. First of all, most importantly, the pizza. I love this scene because I don't know, it's like the whole pizza thing isn't really important to their characters. It's more of a quirk than anything. But I just like how, you know, it at least would make sense for them to be obsessed with pizza how they are, since this is like the first actual good thing they have had. You know, it's like, you know, if for your whole life you've only tasted like honey, and suddenly 10 years later someone says, hey, try some of this strawberry shortcake over here. You try it and you're like, damn, that shit is good. And you just stop fucking with honey because you found something better. You know, it's kind of like that, basically. Or, well, it is that. I hope you did not hear my notification sound because it just went off. But anyway, sorry, had to cut something out. I'm a little sick, so I started coughing a bit. Anyway, but as I was saying, yeah, but you know, it's just a little quirk. It's cool. They do that a lot in this show too, and I like when they just take the time to show off something quirky or to make a big deal of something quirky about any of their characters, or just to get a little goofy sometimes. I like that. It does a real good job of that too. But even more importantly, Donnie and April. Now, I know a lot of people hate, or at least there's some people that hate the whole, oh, they've always tried to ship the turtles with April. And me personally, I don't think it's a problem. You know, I just think the way it should be handled would have to make sense, because again, they're mutant turtles. So like, why is this human girl just gonna be like, oh, say less and, you know, lay it on Donnie type shit? But that's not what happens, and that's what I like about the show as well, is that first of all, it makes sense for Donnie to be so hung up on April, especially after meeting her for the first time, because I mean, they've been in the sewers forever basically, and again, they are teenagers. That's what teenagers do. And when you think about it, it could have not been April. It could have been any other girl that he just so happened to see, and he would have had the same reaction. But I like throughout the whole show, they never actually ship him. You know, it's more so of a thing that, like, you know, she's aware of how much he likes her, but you know, of course she doesn't like him that way, but she can't bring herself to, you know, like, hate him for it, or, you know, go ahead and just go along with it, you know, because she cares about him. She doesn't want to hurt his feelings. But you know, she makes it clear that she doesn't see him like that, but at the same time doesn't get on to him or, you know, thrash on him when he has those little moments of like, hey April, look at me and whatnot, you know. And later in the show, they get a little, or at least Donnie gets more mature in the senses of like valuing April as a team member than as like a romantic partner kind of thing, you know. But yeah, anyway, but yeah, April gets captured, or she's in trouble, and Donnie and them basically help her out. Now I'm not going to be going through every single episode. I'm just going to kind of be highlighting things throughout each of the seasons that I really liked and that I think they did a good job with, especially when it comes down to character arcs, or like these little mini character arcs. Because one thing I will say, and I think it can't go without being said, but basically It has to do with the fact that, I mean, first of all, it's a kids show. It's for Nickelodeon. So there's a lot of goofy moments where someone is supposed to be injured or badly hurt and it doesn't look like it, kind of thing. But I still like that they put in the effort to try to make it seem serious, even if it looks goofy, like, oh, I've been shot but there's no blood and there's no visible wound, kind of thing. That plus I guess they couldn't give a lot of time to character arcs, so a lot of the character arcs is just like one episode. And I'm not gonna say that it's not shown or highlighted throughout the series. It is, but it's in small, subtle ways. And I think that's fine. Such as with this episode that I'm going to be talking about. The one that has to do with that guy that gets mutated and becomes that mutant spider thing. You know, the big thing about this episode is, you know, we all know Raph. You know, he's very hot-headed. And the whole episode was him learning to basically ignore this guy egging him on, because in his mutant form he basically like grows bigger and gets stronger the more he irritates you or something. It's kind of confusing on how it works, but it's like basically if you give in to him, he gets bigger and stronger. And so Raph had to stop reacting and had to listen to Splinter when Splinter told him about the story between him and Shredder way back earlier in Japan when they was in their little ninja clans. And he talked about how instead of ignoring Shredder egging him on in that moment, he, you know, he hit him, like he attacked him. And basically that's what the whole episode is about. Now Raph is still hot-headed throughout the whole series, but there are little things that happen where, you know, you're looking at it like, huh, you know, he really went off on a motherfucker for that, but he didn't. And you know, I really like that, even though they don't make it in your face with character arcs and character development, you know, it's subtle and they highlight it in little ways. So, you know, that's real cool. Like I said, I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't have a script for this, and you know, that's just how I am. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, but so there's that, and then another thing is also references. Now, I'm into a lot of different media. I love anime. I love comics. You know, Marvel is one of my favorites over DC, but I really love DC too. I love different cartoons from both Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, Disney XD, Adult Swim, all that. You know, I really love different movies and TV shows, such as like sitcoms such as Friends and That 70s Show, and movies such as American Psycho, or movie like series trilogy things such as, you know, Friday the 13th and Alien and stuff. And that's why, you know, I'm the kind of motherfucker that just points at the screen and is like, hey, yo, I see that, you know, kind of thing. But a lot of the references in the show, like you have the Voltron reference. It's not the first show that they were watching. That was like the first show they were watching, or that Leo was into, was that Star Trek knockoff show. Then it was the Voltron one. Then after that, like when the Krang mutated everybody in New York, so they had to like leave to go to like one of April's old houses. It was the show they were watching was a mix of things that I've noticed. It was like a mix of Thundercats, because they had a little character Smooch. It was also a mix of of He-Man, because the whole joke with the character in that show was like, he was this big muscular guy that always won and all that. So, it was a mix of little things from Hanna-Barbera and all that. But yeah, that was really cool too, because I did also grow up on Thundercats and a little bit of He-Man. Other references, such as Alien with the squirrel episode, that shit was real cool. You also have the Toxic Avenger, my bad, with the mutant trash guy. What else? There's like, I think I'm missing some. Oh yeah, Friday the 13th reference with the when again they were in that little old house in the forest, and they had that little fucking like plant guy with wearing the overalls. He even put on Casey's mask for a moment in that episode. Later on, later on, because I believe the little Jason Stalker sound was more obvious later on when he ends up coming back in a later episode. I guess they either got the rights or was able to fly under the radar by making it sound similar but not being the same thing. But yeah, that's my favorite thing about that whole character, just the whole Jason Stalker sound. Then I don't know if people would agree with it, but the whole Nightmare Beavers thing, it wasn't a Nightmare on Elm Street reference per se, but you can see the inspiration there a little bit. They're being attacked in their dreams and they can't wake up. You gotta bring the beavers to the real world to defeat them. Sorry, but yeah. So just little things like that. I can't really think of any more right now, either because I'm forgetting them or there isn't anymore. But it's just a little stuff like that. And going into the whole paying homage thing to old storylines. First off, you have the whole like them going into the past and witnessing Splinter's origin, pretty much. That was really good. One of my favorite episodes. Also the whole thing with the time traveler girl, the little master of time lady. That was a good one. First of all, when I first saw it, I was really young when it happened. I was like, yo, I've never seen this before, and it surprised me even more when later on I figured out it was a thing that did happen in the comics. I was like, cool. Just little stuff like that though. Another thing too is Casey Jones, right? Now I love Casey Jones. He was always cool to me, but I'm gonna be straight up for real with y'all. I'm gonna be 100% honest. 2012 Casey Jones is my favorite Casey Jones. I do not care. I love classic Casey Jones, but this one is my favorite because of the whole thing with him basically being this punk kid who's trying to be a vigilante. Now I'll say I wish he was utilized more, because he isn't utilized too well, or at least doesn't get too many moments to shine outside of just being like, this person that doesn't like getting sidelined, even if it's for his own safety. So he ends up being reckless and putting himself in danger because of that. But at the same time, he's also a pretty good asset in terms of battle, because of the way he was he basically just able to kind of turn being a hockey player into its own kind of fighting style kind of thing. Like, something that's supposed to be on ice, he ends up translating it over to, the streets with the whole roller skates and, his exploding hockey pucks and his, bat and his 2 hockey sticks, including that little taser thing he got. And not just that, but when you look at all of it, it's real, like, grimy, really a real, he just put together parts that he had access to make what he needed. But hey, he makes it work. Not just that, but this version of Casey looks the coolest. I know. Everyone loves the little, that little bulky mask with the tank top. I love that shit too, but this version of Casey truly looks like someone who, like, if you didn't know who he was, he looks like he would be willing to kill you, kind of thing. Sort of like he's his own little Batman within New York. So, motherfucker is really cool. And steering back into the whole Donnie April thing, I like it that also between Casey and April, because I feel like they gave the impression that they were gonna be boyfriend and girlfriend. And yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I honestly thought it too. But and maybe to some people, they're kind of like, oh, that's bullshit that they didn't become that because they were already dating. But not really, because it makes sense, first of all, I mean, people will date, but if you don't make anything official, you're just dating, you're just hanging out kind of thing. And, between him joining the Turtles in April, and April wanting to find her dad as well as helping out the Turtles, it makes sense that they wouldn't have time to actually, fulfill their little relationship. But at the same time, Raph made a really good point when Casey ends up asking him in one episode, like, hey, so is April dating anybody? And Raph is like, why does it matter? She's a team member and everything. And Casey, he just accepts that. I mean, he kind of does it rudely by saying, oh, well, I'm not really into redheads, but that's just Casey. But just like with Donnie, he ends up just seeing her as a valued team member, and that's really cool. I like that. So not just that with Casey, but also any like newer characters or older characters that they're doing their own little thing with, I think they do a great job with. First of all, let's start with with Dog Pound, right? Now, I honestly forget his second name when he ends up mutating a second time and becomes like that cool ass werewolf form. So I always call him Dog Pound. I'll put in editing to show what his name is in that form. But I really like Dog Pound because I like how the whole thing was like, oh, he's he was like a Chuck Norris kind of character that was secretly Shredder's pupil and everything. That's why he was such a great martial artist. And it's fucked up on how he manipulates Mikey into believing that they're best friends, because Mikey really admired him because of on TV and stuff, and ended up texting him online, and he took advantage of that. So it's no wonder that Mikey from time to time, as well as the other turtles, make fun of him and call him a loser, because honestly he is. I mean, he already seems like he was washed up before, despite how good he was at fighting. But man went from a basically a washed up ninja to a dog to this werewolf guy. And honestly, that was an improvement. That's the craziest thing about it. But yeah, it's just real cool. And they made him cool by giving him that second little mutagen transformation. Especially because he seems to be like a whole different person after that. I mean, of course, but he seems to favor that mutation over the previous one. I mean, he does say that. He says, "Oh, I feel like a ninja again," because you could imagine, he's more nimble as well as more dangerous. But at the same time, he just seems to be like less, has less of an ego, and is, has just truly became a dog to Shredder. Even when before he was a dog, he was still trying to, do little things behind Shredder's back, but now he's even more of a dog. He's Shredder's lapdog. It's perfect. Then you got Zephyr, if I'm saying his name right. I really like him too. Only thing I don't like though is we didn't get to see him shine too much, and he just got treated as a joke a little bit after a few episodes of being mutated. Especially because, he was like this, he was pretty badass. He was the guy that Shredder would use when, he didn't want to get his hands dirty. He does the lower jobs like stealing and little petty crimes, or, maybe even killing a motherfucker for Shredder from time to time, or extortion and stuff like that. Now, he was cool a little bit, especially after getting the little robotic legs. He just started to fight with his legs, which made sense, and it was effective. Plus, he had that little venomous bite. So you're like, oh, well, it's looking up for him. But later on, once he gets that little butterfly knife sword, it just seems like he just was treated as a joke, especially along with Dog Pound a little bit too, because they both kind of got sidelined a little bit to make room for like Karai and later characters, especially Tiger Claw. Now Tiger Claw, well, yeah, no, I'm gonna just jump into it. Yeah, Tiger Claw, he's my favorite. Motherfucker is a mercenary, and listen, say whatever you want about him, but unlike the others, he gets shit done. And I feel like it's more excusable when he fails, and seems Shredder agrees, because Shredder has never really like punished him or threatened him really, because Tiger Claw really be out here, putting it in on the turtles and everybody. Like you can't fuck with him. You cannot fuck with him. And it makes sense too, because again, Shredder was like, yeah, I hired this mercenary. So it makes sense that he's like such this Aaron Black professional about everything, He knows what he's doing. Shredder can trust him with everything. That's why he became Shredder's little right-hand man, and still is, basically. But yeah, so yeah, he's my favorite, especially in that little scene when he's fighting the turtles and they're in that little cold storage room with the carcasses hanging up, and it's dark in there. They turned out the lights to whoop on his ass, and I tell you, anytime the turtle's eyes go white for whatever reason, it's fire as hell. I love it. But this particular scene where the carcasses are just swinging while they already took a bunch of hits, sneaky little hits on Tiger Claw, and he sees all of them in front of him, but as each carcass just swings by, they disappear, so he's forced to go into the next room where there's actually light. That shit, I'm telling you, if you didn't like the show then, after that scene, you have to like it now. But yeah, and then Bebop and Rocksteady. Now, when they first came about, I thought they were pretty cool. You know, you got this guy that uses this high-tech invisible suit that, you know, he, you know, like, I want to say surf arounds on, because he gets to, in his shoes, he can make this little pathway like it's Roblox or something. And then, you know, you got the Russian guy and everything. You know, he's basically just an arms dealer for Shredder, but through him, Shredder controls the Russian mob, he said. Well, he says later on in the show. But, I don't know. There wasn't much to them. They were already a goofy bunch to begin with. But, you know, you can't really be mad about that even after they get mutated, because I've seen them in the older shows. They were already a goofy bunch. In like the 2017 live action movies, they were a goofy bunch. But you know, you can't really be mad at that. It's always nice to have those kind of characters when it comes to Ninja Turtles. I like them. You know, they're not that much of a threat, or at least they shouldn't be, but they still do enough to the Turtles to be a problem. But it's obvious that their place under Shredder is to just be, you know, just to be there, just to give you more issues, give the Turtles more issues. Then Baxter Stockman. Now, I know in one of the series, I'll throw up in editing to actually give the title because I forget, but his whole thing is that everyone talked about, we'll talk about how hilarious it is that for some reason Shredder kept him around even though he kept failing him, and his punishment was always to get like a piece of his body replaced with something robotic until he just was a brain inside of a damn robotic suit. But yeah, you know, I already liked Baxter Stockman. You know, it makes sense to have that character, but this is my favorite version of Baxter Stockman. You know, just like this fucking dweeb that, you know, thinks he deserves whatever status he deserves because of his intellect and because of his little robots and stuff. But, you know, he actually becomes a really good character after he mutates and becomes that fly thing. You know, he ends up like, you know, kind of being pretty scary, because I'm pretty sure that whole thing was inspired by The Fly, the movie. You know, especially with the, at the end of the episode, he like spits on a chocolate bar and, you know, consumes its goo, like in that movie as well. So, you know, regardless, like his little appearance of like sneaking around the lab when Dog Pound goes in there to see what he turned into is pretty scary and really cool. And even though now he's just like this, he's just riding the name of Shredder, calling him Master and everything, he's still a pretty cool character, and he's still an issue. I mean, I'd say even more so because he can just spit this acidic goo and fly around. He can actually keep up with the Turtles and fight them. Maybe not too much, but it's still a great improvement from his little robots, which even then was still a problem, but it had that massive flaw of just spraying that pheromone, and it was up for him too. So yeah, sorry, I coughed again, I had to cut that out. But yeah, it's just really cool. He's my favorite version of Baxter. Who else? Well, first of all, just as a little sunny, god damn, a little funny side note, And that's just, April's dad has to have the most PTSD ever. I mean, I find it funny that they didn't really do much with his character. They just made him this guy to get traumatized and worry about April 24/7. Yeah, I don't know. I just find that hilarious. I also find his mutation cool, though. The whole Man-Bat thing. I don't know if that's supposed to be a DC reference, but if it is, I love it because I really like Man-Bat, and they need to do more with him. But that's a episode for another day. Anyway, but yeah, aside from that, though, you know, let's talk about the little mutant allies, I guess. Main one being Spike. Spike. First of all, I find it funny that Raph is a turtle, like a mutant turtle, and he just so happened to have a pet turtle. I also like how the whole episode is like Spike is just like this, is basically this dark side of Raph's conscience, where he just is like, oh, I don't need these guys, I can do everything way better on my own. And you know, Spike perfectly embodies that, and throughout the whole episode, like, he's whooping on his brother's ass and everything, and you know, trying to tell Raph like, hey, sorry, I had to cough again. Anyway, he's just like, hey, yeah, it's just you and me, we're better than them, we're stronger. And you know, the whole episode was so crazy when I saw it for the first time, and it is another one of my favorite episodes, mainly just because of, like, you know, their asses just get handed to them, and it's just crazy though to see. But also because, you know, towards the end, when Spike is falling off that building, like, Raph is like, yo, grab my hand, and he still falls. And of course, at the end of it, like, he ran off, like, he was fine, but still. That's why it makes it even more better where he comes in with the mutanimals, with Pigeon Pete, the monkey guy, I forget his name, I'll throw up in editing, in Leatherhead, which Leatherhead was already my favorite, you know, him being this misunderstood character and Mikey being the only one that actually, you know, was trying to be like, hey guys, just listen to him, because he saw he was scared. Also, like, their relationship on how, like, Mikey kind of treats him like a pet in a sense, you know, with these little, like, pets and stuff he gives him, and the way he, like, treats him in such a fatherly way, I guess. Pigeon Pete is just Pigeon Pete, you know, he's comic relief character. We always loved them characters. Come on in, we got soup. But and then you have, like, the monkey guy, like I said. I actually really started to like him after a bit. I mean, I already liked him before, I had no reason not to, but I like how his whole thing wasn't just being Donnie's, you know, like, rival in terms of, like, intelligence. Like, he actually could pull through for different missions, and you know, it was real cool. I liked the mutanimals. But again, you know, I wish they did way more with all of them. I just wish they did. I mean, they did enough, but it would have been cool to see, especially with, again, Spike after he redeemed himself so many times, and you know, actually started to feel bad for the things he has done. But yeah, and you know, steering into April real quick, I really love what they did with her character. As far as I know, April has never been a character before then to be like involved combat wise or anything, but I love how her whole thing's like, oh, she's half Krang, and you know, she is you know, the Krang's key to their plan to take over. Not just that, but you know, she's immune to mutagen, but also because, I mean, that's really just a bonus, but the main thing here is, like, the fact that because she's a Krang, she has this low telekinesis, low telepathy kind of power that Splinter helps her taps into. But as the series goes on, it gets stronger into her like being able to sense intention as like a low scale spidey sense kind of thing, and these little mind blasts, and reading people's minds and like projecting herself into people's minds and everything to get through to them. Especially after the space arc, it got even more powerful after she got that little piece of that little alien tech around that she wears as a necklace. But even better, she became a full ninja after that, which was really cool because she's basically Kenshi. But moving on to that whole dinosaur thing, I tell you, I damn near almost cried the first time years ago, the first time I saw Shredder, stab Splinter in the back like that. Now, it was years ago before I saw, I'm binge watching it right now, but I already watched it twice before. The second time was an actual binge watch when it was coming on like Nicktoons. But that was still years ago as well. The first time I only watched bits and pieces of it. So like back then when this first happened for the first time, I was like, yo, what the fuck? And especially when like that interdimensional episode happens and Leo wants to explain to Splinter like what is gonna happen in the future but can't. That was sad too. I was like, man, just tell him. And when he didn't tell him, I was like, nah. Regardless though, I really love the space arc. I don't know if they already did that before. It was new to me. But I feel like it's a great example that they weren't afraid to do new things with the Turtles. Like, they weren't afraid that fans were gonna be like, oh, I hate this, these little purists. And props for them for that. But at the same time, they still kept the core of the Turtles. That's the important thing. Not much to say here aside from just like the whole thing with Raph and the little like Mona Lisa was her name that he gave her. I really like that. I like how they gave the Turtles all their own love interests, even if nothing really became of it. Mikey with the Time Lord girl, Raph with the Mona Lisa, Leo with Karai, and Donnie with April. But it was still really cool because again, all those things just go to show like the fact that they're teenagers and the fact that they've been in the sewers prior to this. It just goes to show like it just makes sense that they would be this way, especially after when she ends up betraying them to like save her homeworld or protect it from like that alien bug guy. I forget his name too. I'll throw it up in editing. It hits even way harder when Raph is like, yo, what the fuck? Especially his PTSD later on, because one of the big things is that he's afraid of roaches. And in this little episode where he's having like PTSD about it, he was like, oh, well, I'm not afraid of like roaches or small bugs, but when it comes to like these big mutated motherfuckers, he just goes back to that moment of being betrayed and dealing with that whole bug planet. So shit's nuts. But I will say about the whole space arc, I did not like how it ended, or at least how they handled the whole time thing, because because it's like when you do any sort of time travel story, you have to be careful. You gotta make sure it can't just be a cop-out that can be used all the time, anytime, to fix everything. But most importantly, how it's supposed to end, especially when these two separate timelines like collide with each other. And I didn't really like how the whole thing was like, the cyborg robot guy sacrifices himself, but you know, the past version of him exists, so it really didn't matter. It was cool that they still showed that his future self lives, but still, you know. And that past April, Casey and the Turtles just go and hop onto his ship, and so it's the future Turtles and, you know, April and Casey that, you know, are like you know, that are in the past / main timeline. You know, I feel like it would have been way better if it just kind of all fixed itself. You know, like, oh, well, because they did that, none of this ever happened, so, you know, time just sort of fixes itself and everything's back to normal kind of thing. Sorry, I coughed again, had to cut that out. But anyway, but yeah, I just feel like that could have been handled a lot better, and everything. So yeah. But with that being said, I will be doing a part 2 when I finish the rest. I'll even be talking a little bit more about some stuff I left out for this episode. But until then, tune in next time, as we'll be talking about Final Fantasy XIV next episode, because I picked up that game again, and I'm really loving it. I'm really loving it out here. So yeah, with that being said, you know, keep it going, you know, stick to your interests no matter what anyone tells you, whether you're a furry, a cosplayer, whether you're into anime, comics, whatever tickles your fancy. Keep on pushing, keep on going. You know, just make yourself happy, you know? So yeah, with that being said, sorry for repeating myself, but with that being said, yeah, bye.